You spend enough time on the road, you learn that not all asphalt is made equal. Some stretches of highway are just different. They've got a personality. Some are angry, bucking you with potholes and cracked pavement. Some are sleepy, long and straight and hypnotic, trying to lull you into the great final ditch. And some are hungry. I've been driving these steel beasts for 30 years now. I've hauled produce from the valleys of California to the frozen grocery docks of Chicago. I've hauled lumber from the misty Pacific Northwest to the bone-dry deserts of Arizona. I know the roads. I know their moods. But there's one road I only ever drove twice. A stretch of two-lane blacktop that slithers up and over a pass in the Sierra Nevadas. Locally, they just call it the grade. Officially, it's a state route nobody uses anymore since the big interstate was blasted through the next mountain over. But sometimes, when a storm shuts down the interstate, you've got no choice.
The first time I heard about it was at a Greasy Spoon diner near Sacramento. It was late, the air thick with the smell of fried bacon and stale coffee. I was young then, full of piss and vinegar, thought I knew everything. I was talking to an old-timer, a guy named Mac, whose face was a road map of wrinkles. I was bragging about a shortcut I was planning to take to make my delivery to Reno ahead of schedule, the grade. Mac stopped stirring his coffee. He put the spoon down with a little clink and looked at me. His eyes weren't mean, just tired, deeply tired. "You don't want to take that road, son," he said, his voice raspy like gravel. "Why not? It'll shave 3 hours on my time. Dispatch'll love it." He shook his head slowly. "Some things are more important than time. That road, it holds a grudge."
And then he told me the story. Back in the 70s, he said. A bad winter. A school bus full of kids coming back from some trip. Maybe a ski thing, maybe just a day out. They were coming down the grade when a fuel tanker lost control coming up. It was foggy, the road was slick, a head-on collision. The sound, Max said, was like the mountain itself cracking open. The fire? Well, he didn't talk about the fire. Nobody who was there ever did. "It's a sad story, Mac, a tragedy," I said, trying to sound respectful. "But it was a long time ago." "Time ain't a straight line on that pass," he said, picking up his spoon again, but not stirring. "It's a loop. You get the right conditions, real thick fog, the kind that swallows sound, and that accident, it happens all over again. You'll hear it, the squeal of the air brakes that did no good, and then the screaming." I must have given him a skeptical look. "I'm telling you, son," he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You hear the echoes, and after the sound, you see them, the kids, standing on the shoulder, in the fog, thumbs out, looking for a ride home." He took a long sip of his coffee. "There's only one rule for that road. You see 'em, you hear 'em, you don't even think about tapping the brakes. You put your foot to the floor and you do not stop. You don't look back, you just drive. You stop and you become part of the story. You stop and they get in." I chuckled. It was a good campfire story, a classic trucker's ghost tale. Every route had one. The vanishing hitchhiker, the phantom black dog. I thanked him for the coffee, paid my check, and left, the old man's words rattling around in my head like loose bolts. A ghost story, that's all it was. 3 hours later, I was at the turnoff for the grade. The big digital sign over the interstate was flashing. I-80 closed at Donner Summit. Accident. Use alternate routes. My only alternate route was straight ahead. A light rain was falling, and as I started the long climb up the mountain, it turned into a thick, wet fog, and it rolled down the hillsides like a slow-motion avalanche, blanketing the pines and swallowing the road ahead. The world shrank to the yellow glow of my headlights, cutting a weak tunnel into an endless, shifting wall of white. And for the first time,
Mac's story sounds so funny anymore.
The climb was a gear-grinding, engine-groaning crawl. My rig, a Peterbilt with a 53-foot reefer trailer full of lettuce, felt like a dinosaur trying to climb a cliff. The fog was the thickest I'd ever seen. It wasn't just a weather condition, it was a physical presence. It deadened every sound until the only things I could hear were the diesel growl of my own engine, the rhythmic slap, slap, slap by the windshield wipers, and the frantic pounding of my own heart. The air in the cab grew cold, a damp chill that had nothing to do with the outside temperature. I cranked the heat, but it didn't touch it. It felt like I was driving through a cold, wet blanket. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I kept telling myself it was just nerves, an unfamiliar road, bad weather, standard stuff. But it was more than that. The place felt wrong. Empty and yet terribly full at the same time. I was maybe 10 miles up the grade, near the summit where the road leveled out for a bit before the steep descent. The fog was so dense now that my high beams were useless, just a solid wall of white light reflecting back at me. I was crawling along at maybe 15 miles per hour, my eyes straining to see the yellow line. That's when I first heard it. It was faint, almost lost in the engine's thrum, a high-pitched squeal. I thought maybe it was a fan belt or the air brakes on another truck somewhere ahead, lost in the soup. I flicked on the CB radio. Static, nothing but white noise. Then the sound came again, louder this time, the unmistakable, terrifying shriek of locking tires on wet pavement. It sounded impossibly close. My foot instinctively moved to my own brake pedal. I scanned the fog ahead, my heart lodged in my throat. Nothing. The road was empty. My mind was playing tricks on me. Sleep deprivation, the hypnotic effect of the road, the black dog, we call it. But then came the other sound. It started as a single, high, terrified scream, and then it was joined by others, a chorus of them. They were young voices, children's voices, shrieking in pure, unadulterated terror. It wasn't a memory. It wasn't the wind. It was there, right outside my cab, echoing in the dense, silent fog. Every rational part of my brain was screaming at me. It's an auditory hallucination. It's the wind whistling through the grill. But the rest of me, the old primitive part of my brain, knew exactly what I was hearing. Mac's words came back to me, cold and clear. You'll hear it. It happens all over again.
My breath hitched. My hands were slick with sweat on the wheel. And through the maelstrom of ghostly noise, my headlights caught something. Movement. On the right shoulder. At first, it was just a shape, a smudge in the white. Then another. They resolved into figures. Small figures. Maybe half a dozen of them, just standing there in the mist, right at the edge of the asphalt. I could see the vague outline of worn jeans, flannel shirts, winter coats. Styles from a long time ago. And as I got closer, a little girl, no older than 9 or 10, with long dark hair plastered to her face by the damp, stepped forward. She lifted a small pale hand, her thumb extended. A hitchhiker.
My whole body went rigid. Mac's voice was a roar in my ears now. You don't stop! But my God, she looked so real, so lost. The instinct to help, to pull over and offer a ride to a child lost in this weather was overwhelming. It's what any decent person would do. My foot hovered over the brake. For a split second, I was going to do it. I was going to stop. The truck slowed. Then, through the fog, I saw her eyes. They weren't scared. They weren't pleading. They were empty, like two dark holes in a porcelain mask. And behind her, the other figures didn't move. They just watched. There was a terrible stillness about them, a predatory patience. A wave of cold, primal fear washed over me, colder than the air in the cab. This wasn't a lost child. This was something else. I stomped on the accelerator. The engine roared, a guttural protest. The truck lunged forward. I shot past them, my eyes locked on the road ahead. I didn't dare look at them directly, but in my peripheral vision, I saw them all turn their heads in perfect unison to follow me as I passed.
I glanced for a stupid second in my passenger side mirror. The fog was already swallowing them. But for a moment, I saw the little girl's face clearly. Her expression wasn't angry. It was just disappointed, as if I'd failed a test. And then she and the others were gone, erased by the white. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. I didn't slow down until I was halfway down the mountain, and the fog had started to thin. The sun was coming up when I finally hit the interstate on the other side. I pulled into the first rest area, shaking so badly I could barely put the rig in park. I sat there for an hour, watching the world come back to life, trying to convince myself I had imagined the whole thing. But I knew I hadn't. I knew it was real, and I knew I was never, ever coming back to that road.
You'd think an experience like that would be something you could just file away. Lock it in a box in the back of your mind labeled "Strange Things on the Road" and throw away the key. For a while, I managed to do that. I stuck to the main highways, took the long way around, and told myself it was just a bad dream fueled by exhaustion and an old man's spooky story. But it didn't stay locked away. It started to leak out. I'd be driving late at night on some empty stretch of I-40 in Arizona, and I'd catch a glimpse of something small on the shoulder in my mirror, and my blood would run cold. It would just be a highway marker or a piece of trash, but for a second, it had a shape. Right here, a tire squeal on dry pavement a few cars ahead, and the sound of children's laughter from a passing minivan would suddenly sound like screams. The little girl's face was the worst part. That empty, disappointed look. It haunted my sleep. And wake up in my sleeper cab, drenched in a cold sweat, the image of her eyes burned into the back of my.
After about a year of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know. I needed proof that I wasn't going crazy. I needed to know if Mac's story was just a story, or if it was real history. I had a layover in Sacramento, the same city where I'd first heard the tale. I left my rig at the truck stop and took a cab to the city's main public library. It felt strange walking in there, smelling of diesel and road dust, among all the quiet students and old folks reading newspapers. I found my way to the archives, the place where they keep the old papers on microfilm. I asked the librarian, a kindly-looking woman with gray hair and glasses, for newspapers from the area, from the 1970s. "Any specific year?" she asked. "Let's try from 72 to 78, I said, picking a range. "And I'm looking for a traffic accident, a bad one, on a mountain pass nearby." Her friendly expression tightened just a little. "Ah," she said softly, "you must mean the grade." My heart skipped a beat. "You know it?" "Everyone who's lived here long enough knows it," she said, her voice low. "A terrible thing. Happened in the winter of '73, February."
She set me up with the microfilm machine and a spool dated February 1973. It was a clumsy old-fashioned thing. I spent an hour scrolling through grainy pages of forgotten ads and local news. And then I found it. The headline hit me like a physical blow. "Bus tragedy on Route 49. 14 children and 2 adults perish in fiery crash. My hands were shaking as I read. It was all there, just as Mac had said. A school bus from a small-town elementary school returning from a field trip. A tanker truck carrying gasoline. Icy roads, dense fog. The article was stark, full of horrifying details. It listed the names of the children. 14 names, 14 lives, snuffed out in an instant. There was a grainy black and white photo of the bus, or what was left of it. A blackened, twisted metal skeleton against the snow-dusted pines. I felt sick. This wasn't a legend. This was real. These were real kids. Sarah, age 9. Michael, age 10. Emily, age 8. I read every name.
But as I scrolled to the follow-up articles from the next few days, I found something that Mac hadn't told me. It was in the official accident report summary printed in the paper, the initial investigation. They had interviewed the first people on the scene, and there was a detail that the police had found odd. They assumed it was a result of the collision's impact. The back emergency door of the bus was wide open, not broken open, not torn off, unlatched and swung wide, as if someone had opened it to get out just before or during the crash. But that made no sense. And something else. A quote from the trucker who drove the fuel tanker. He had survived the initial impact, but died from his burns a few days later in the hospital. The last thing he kept whispering to the nurse over and over again was, "They were already on the road." The children, they were already in the middle of the road. I swerved to miss the children. The investigators dismissed it. They said he was delirious from his injuries. But I sat there in the silence of the library, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and a new, more terrible version of the story started to form in my mind.
What if the crash wasn't the beginning of the horror? What if the crash was the result of it? What if that tanker driver saw the same thing I did? But unlike me, what if he had stopped? Or at least tried to? The legend says don't stop because they'll get in. But maybe it's simpler and far worse than that. Maybe the rule is don't stop, because stopping is what caused it all to happen in the first place. Stopping is the echo that the road keeps demanding. And as I walked out of that library into the California sunshine, a terrifying thought burrowed into my mind. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a trap, and it was still being set, night after foggy night. Years passed, maybe 10 of them. I got older, my hair got grayer, and my face got a little more like Mac's road map of wrinkles. I'd seen 1,000,000 miles of highway roll under my wheels. I'd stuck to my vow. I never drove the grade again. If a load was going to Reno, I'd add a day to the trip and go the long way around through southern Oregon if I had to. My dispatcher thought I was crazy, but he paid the fuel bills, so he let me be. The memory of that night, of those empty eyes in the fog, had faded from a raw wound to a dull, throbbing scar. But it was always there. Then came the run I couldn't get out of. It was a rush job, high priority. Medical equipment needed urgently at a hospital in Reno. A massive blizzard was tearing through the country, a once-in-a-decade storm. It had already shut down almost every pass in the Sierras, all except one. The one the state kept open as a last resort emergency route because it was lower in elevation than the main interstate, the grade. I told dispatch no. I said I was sick. I said my engine was acting up. I tried every excuse I could think of, but it was a life-or-death shipment. The company owner himself got on the phone. "This isn't a request," he said. "Get that truck to Reno." So I went. A heavy sense of dread settled over me as I gassed up. It felt like I was driving to my own execution. As I approached the turnoff, the snow started. Not a gentle flurry, but a thick, heavy, wet snow that instantly turned to slush on the road. And with it came the fog. It was even thicker than I remembered.
a suffocating, sound-devouring beast. The climb was just as bad, only this time the asphalt was coated in a treacherous layer of ice. The rig fish-tailed once or twice, and I had to fight the wheel to keep it straight. The world was nothing but swirling white and the dim glow of my dash lights. The CB was dead. My phone had no signal. I was alone, utterly and completely alone with the mountain. I reached the summit, that same flat stretch of road. My hands were clamped to the steering wheel so tight they ached. I kept my eyes pinned to the center line, repeating a mantra in my head. Don't look at the shoulder. Don't listen. Just drive. Just get through it. For a while, there was nothing. Only the hiss of the tires on the slush and the moan of the wind. Maybe, I thought, just maybe the snow is too bad even for ghosts. A small, desperate flicker of hope. It was a lie. The sound started just like before, that awful metallic squeal of brakes that fail, then the screams, louder this time. It seemed sharper. Not an echo, but an immediate, present reality. My heart hammered against my ribs. Just drive, don't look, foot on the gas.
My headlights cut through the gloom, and there they were, standing on the shoulder, just like I knew they would be. Unchanged, timeless, small dark shapes in the swirling snow and fog. The little girl was at the front again, her long dark hair whipping around her face in the wind. She raised her hand, her thumb out. "Don't stop!" Mac's voice screamed in my memory. "Don't you dare stop!" The article in the library flashed in my mind. The tanker driver. I swerved to miss the children. He stopped. He tried to stop. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator. My rig was my shield, a 2-ton steel beast. They were ghosts. They couldn't hurt me if I just kept going. The engine roared. I was doing 30, maybe 35 miles per hour now, pushing my luck on the ice. But this time, it was different. As I drew level with them, the little girl did something new. She didn't just stand there. She looked right at me, right through the windshield, and then she stumbled. A deliberate, theatrical fall right off the shoulder and into my middle of my lane. She lay there, a small, dark bundle directly in my path.
It was a trap. I knew it. My brain screamed it. It's not real. Drive through it. It's just mist and bad memories. But my body didn't listen. 10 years of guilt, of running from the memory of leaving a child on the side of a mountain, took over. Every instinct a human being possesses to protect, to save, to not run over what looks like a little girl lying in the road, it all came crashing down on me. I slammed on the brakes. The world dissolved into a nightmare of sound and motion. The air brakes hissed and shrieked. The massive weight of the trailer, full of medical equipment, pushed me forward. The tires lost their grip on the ice. My rig jackknifed. The cab swung violently to the left, and the trailer slid sideways, a slow-motion catastrophe. I was no longer a driver. I was just a passenger in a 40-ton wrecking ball. The truck scraped against the granite rock face of the mountain with a deafening, grinding scream of tearing metal. And then, with a final, shuddering jolt, it stopped.
Silence. The engine had stalled. The only sound was the ticking of cooling metal and my own ragged breathing. The cab was tilted at a crazy angle, my face pressed against the side window. Outside, there was only snow and fog. I looked at the spot on the road where the little girl had been. It was empty. All the figures on the shoulder were gone. There was nothing. Just the silent mountain and my wrecked rig. A wave of relief, so powerful it almost made me sick, washed over me. I'd crashed, but I was alive, and they were gone.
And then I heard it. A tiny, soft sound. Click. It was the sound of the passenger side door latch from the inside. It turned slowly, and the heavy door creaked open just a few inches into the swirling fog.
The silence that followed was the most terrifying thing I have ever experienced. It was a heavy, absolute void. The wind had stopped. The snow fell without a sound. It was like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting. The passenger door hung ajar, a black opening into the white fog. I didn't see anything get in. I didn't hear a footstep or the rustle of clothing. But I felt it. A sudden, intense drop in temperature inside the cab. My breath plumed in front of my face, a cloud of white in the dim glow of the emergency lights. The cold wasn't natural. It was a dead cold. A cellar-deep chill that sank right into your bones and made your teeth ache. And the air, which had smelled of stale coffee and diesel, now carried a faint, cloying scent. The smell of wet earth and something old like decaying leaves. The door swung shut with a solid, final thud. I was not alone anymore.
My entire body was locked in a paralysis of pure terror. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I could only stare straight ahead at the rock face my truck was now intimately acquainted with. I could feel a presence on the passenger seat, a weight, a focus, an awareness. The kind of feeling you get when you know without a shadow of a doubt that someone is standing right behind you in a dark room. It took every ounce of will I possessed to restart the engine. My hands were trembling so violently that it took me 3 tries to turn the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The sound, a welcome, pathetic defense against the suffocating silence. With a groan of tortured metal, I managed to get the truck back on the road. The trailer was damaged, but the axe was held. I could still drive. I drove. I didn't know what else to do. I drove down that mountain with my uninvited passenger, my silent companion. I didn't dare look at the seat next to me, but I could see a reflection in the dark windshield, a distorted, wavering shape in the space where a person should be. A small shape.
The rest of the trip to Reno was a long, cold nightmare. The radio would occasionally crackle to life, not with voices, but with faint, disjointed snippets of a children's nursery rhyme, sung in an off-key, breathy whisper. "Ring around the rosy," a tiny voice would sing before dissolving into static. Sometimes, in the reflection of my side mirror, I'd see a small handprint appear on the inside of the passenger window, only to fade away moments later.
When I finally pulled into the hospital loading dock in Reno, the sun was just starting to rise. The yard workers who came out to meet me kept their distance. One of them, a young kid, looked at me and said, "Man, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He laughed. I didn't. I dropped the trailer and drove my rig straight to a motel. I left the engine running. I opened both doors of the cab, and I walked away. I just left it. The company could have it. I never drove that truck again. I never drove any truck again.
That was a long time ago. But the cold never really left me. Sometimes, on a damp night, I can still feel it. That deep, unnatural chill. I still have the nightmares, but I'm not just seeing the ghost anymore. I'm feeling her. I can feel the memory of that crushing disappointment, the unending loop of that final terrifying moment on the grade. Because when I stopped, I didn't just become part of the story. I picked up a piece of it, and now I have to carry it. So now I'm the old-timer. I'm the one in the Greasy Spoon diner with tired eyes, telling stories to young, arrogant drivers who think they know everything. And when they tell me they're planning on taking a shortcut over a certain pass in the Sierras, I put down my spoon and I look them dead in the eye and I tell them my story.
And I end it with the only truth I have left.
the one rule. It's not just a story, I tell them, my voice a gravelly whisper. It's a toll. You drive through that place and you pay with a piece of your sanity. But you stop, and you pay with everything else. So listen to me. Whatever you think you see, whatever you hear, whatever your heart tells you to do, you don't stop. You never, ever stop.